Hello, my name is Emily, and I am here today with nationally recognized authority in trust clause litigation, Dan Dalton. How are you today, Dan?
Doing great, Emily. It's a beautiful day outside. I'm looking forward to talk to you more about trust clause litigation.
So, Dan, what is the state of the local churches leaving the United Methodist Church in March of 2023?
Well, most of you probably heard of the most recent report by Lovett Weems from the Center of Church Leadership. He did this whole article called Leadership Development, where he did some sort of analysis on local churches leaving. And really in the last 2 years, from 2020 to 2022, he looked at those churches and found about 2,000 churches have left the denomination and came up with some headlines that were, quite frankly, sensational. Most of the churches were in the South, most were led by men, most were also white churches that had left. But really, you kind of need to dig into the data to find out really what's happened. And we're learning this through our clients. It is true most of the churches that have left were in the South, and in Texas in particular, primarily because Texas had 5 conferences. It had a lot of churches in the state of Texas, but more importantly, Texas law was very favorable to local churches leaving. So there wasn't a lot of leverage. There wasn't a lot of things that the bishops in Texas could do to preclude churches from leaving if they wanted to leave. Because if a local church wanted to sue and invalidate the trust clause, it would likely be invalidated, and they knew that. So there was a lot of churches that just left because of that, and that's why you saw the bulk of churches leaving there. You also saw a lot of churches leaving the South Georgia Conference, and in that conference, there was a process that was very easy for local churches to leave. Most of those churches were traditional and conservative churches. So again, when you add those two conferences together, you're going to see the bulk of churches that left. But what we're seeing nationwide is that there's just a couple characteristics of churches that have left and that have been successful. Usually it's the largest churches in the conference. So like in the Illinois Great Rivers Conference, in the Missouri Annual Conference, in the Arkansas Annual Conference, Texas Annual Conference, even the California Nevada Conference, the largest churches have left. And those are churches that have multiple thousands of members, and then the next church lower might be multiple hundreds of members. So the larger churches with the most members are leaving. You're also seeing churches that are mostly financially strong are leaving. Those are the ones that have gone through this process and looked and seen that they really don't need a denomination to move forward. So those churches have left as well. There have been a handful of churches in some conferences in smaller rural areas where those churches have left. But for the most part, it's the larger, healthier churches that have left. And it's kind of been our experience through. The one through line you see through this research is that the number of churches is relatively low to the number of churches that have been reported as open churches prior to 2019. But you need to keep in mind that if you look, you can look in the statistics, which is under data. Mostly between 65 and 75% of most churches and most conferences are 100 members or less. And so those are generally small churches that are the bulk of people, United Methodist churches. You have a lot of churches out there too, where there's 15, 20 members only that are still counted as open churches, and they may not have anybody worshiping there right now, or they might be not led by clergy, for example, or things like that. So at the end of the day, you're going to see a number of churches that still remain in United Methodist, primarily because they don't really either want to leave, they don't either need to leave, or more likely they can't leave. There have been 8 conferences so far where there's been no disaffiliation, where again, these are conferences where we get contacted that churches want to leave, but because of the processes and the cost imposed by the local annual conference, they can't leave. So that's kind of the state of where things are today. We'll probably see another wave of about 1,000 churches go out by the June annual conference. And there's going to be some specially called annual conferences in the fall of 2023. So maybe another 500 at that point in time. And I would imagine at that level, that's kind of where we'll taper off for local churches leaving through 2553. And then after that, it's going to be litigation. It'll be one by one churches, I would suppose. And I'm guessing, because this is kind of like the same pattern that occurred in the Presbyterian USA world, where churches will say, you know, we want out as well. And we'll see that happen in the future. The good news, though, is that the churches that have left have grown substantially. We keep in contact with our clients after disaffiliation. We find that these churches are growing because there's the people that generally come like 3 times a year, Christmas Eve, Easter, and Mother's Day, they start coming more often. Then you'll see more people from the community that are attending a local Methodist church where they're not, that their former church isn't doing anything. So they're going to go and join this new church as well. And there's just a general energy that draws in more people. So a lot of the churches that have left are growing and continue to grow. And it's a pretty remarkable thing to see as well. So overall, the trend is up in terms of members leaving the local United Methodist churches. The actual number of physical churches have probably steady off, and it's going to decline in about a year or so. And then we're going to find probably church by church members leaving, and through, you know, they've been told through this process just to wait till 2024 for the general conference, and something better will happen, and they'll find out nothing better has happened, and then they'll start suing to leave as well. So that's kind of where we see things are going right now with churches that are leaving or who have left the United Methodist Church as of March of 2023.
Well, thank you for your insight, Dan. If your church is interested in hiring our firm to help you through the disaffiliation process, please reach out to our office at 313-859-6000 or email us today. Thank you.